Okay, so I'm going to talk about 2.2 programming fundamentals. So in this topic, you've got some programming theory. So you'll get some little theory questions about programming, like things to do with data type or things to do with operators. I'll explain that later if you're not sure what I'm talking about. And then you will get larger algorithm questions where they give you a scenario and you have to either write an algorithm or fill in the gaps of a given algorithm. So let's have a look at the spec. The first part, programming fundamentals, we need to know what a variable is, a constant is, an operator, an input, an output, and what the word assignments means. And you need to know about 3 basic programming constructs used to control the flow through your program that you've written. They are sequence, selection, and iteration. And you need to know operators, so arithmetic operators like plus, minus, and things like that. And then also Boolean operators and comparison operators. So Boolean operators are things like the word and or, and not. Comparison operators are greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to. So that's the first section. Second section, you need to know about the data types. So you'll probably be given some code and asked to identify the data types that are being used in that code in some of the variables. Or you might be given some example data and asked to say what the most appropriate data type would be. There are 5, so we'll talk about those in a bit. And then this last section, additional programming techniques, is where kind of the more tricky kind of techniques come into play. So you've got basic string manipulation. So string is alphanumeric characters, like a sentence. If you had a sentence in a variable, and there are certain things that you can do to strings, like you can pull out individual letters, you can make it upper and lower case, you can calculate the length of it, for example. File handling, so how you link to a file and then pull data in to your program, or maybe write data to the file. Sounds complicated, but those questions are quite easy to get marks from. I'm going to show you how in a minute. The use of records to store data is just when you have a row of data, like an Excel spreadsheet in a table of data. You use each row contains a record of somebody's details or something's details. That's just what a record is. And SQL is used to search through a database and pull out data. Arrays, which is the next thing down, just there, is a list or a collection of data within a program that has one name. So, for example, students it could be the array could be the students array, and then it could contain all of you guys' names, for example. Subprograms is when you have a small algorithm within a program, and there are 2 types: a function and a procedure. The function returns a value back into the program, and the procedure doesn't. It just runs a load of instructions and doesn't return any value. And then lastly, we've got random number generation. So that's it. That's what's covered. It is the largest chapter in paper 2. So let's start talking about it. So the basics. Variables. Sometimes you're asked what a variable is. So a variable is in your code when you have got something like this. Oops, bear with me a sec. Not doing very well here. Let's try over there. Right, so if it was name equals speech marks Bob, right, string variable, that's the variable just there, and the equal sign that follows it is the assignment. So you are assigning Bob to that variable, but the actual definition, if you're asked to define it, is it's a memory location, 1 mark, that stores data that can change. A constant is a memory location that stores data that cannot change. So if you saw some code like this, right? So let's say Bob's 30, and then you had a little bit of code that went like this: age *2. That is a constant that cannot change. There's no way of you changing that once the program's running, so that's a constant. But the definition, memory location that stores data that cannot change. Okay, assignment I've mentioned. It's when you are declaring data to be in a variable. Casting is when you convert data type. So you convert a data type. So let's say for some reason I wanted to turn that age there into a string. By doing that, I've changed the data type and I've basically performed casting. That might be a 1 mark question asking you what it means. It's either something you know or you don't know, so that's all it is, changing data type. Now, the data types. The 5 data types are string, just alphanumeric characters, letters and numbers, so postcode, somebody's name, address, that would be a string. Integer, whole number. Now, the next one, Sandboard calls it real. You could call it float. It is a decimal number. That's the next one. And 2 more. Character, which is a single alphanumeric character, like a letter, just 1. And the last one, last but not least, a Boolean variable. So a Boolean variable is true or false. So let's say that it was this. The capital T indicates that this is a Boolean variable, and it's just a variable that kind of keeps track of something that has 2 states, basically. It can be very useful when you're trying to control the flow of your program and you want something to trigger something else happening. You could use a Boolean variable. Alright, next, programming constructs. Sequence is just instructions that are on the same indentation level. That's a sequence. These are programming constructs. Every year you get given some code and asked a question. What programming constructs are in this? There's only 3 to remember. Sequence, instructions one after another on the same indentation level. Selection is an if statement. Iteration is a loop. So there are 2 types of loop, count controlled and condition controlled. So a count controlled loop is a for loop. It loops for an exact number of times. Condition controlled loops until a condition is true. So you could do a while loop, which will loop while something is true and then stop when it's not. Or you could do a repeat until or do until, and that will do 1 run through of the code and then check the condition at the end. You can't do that in Python. So it's something that, well, you guys probably might have seen it by doing VB, but it's often not seen. Alright, there is one other thing that I haven't mentioned, which is another type of iteration, which is called a case piece of code, which I might show you towards the end. But first of all, let's just keep moving through this. Arithmetic operators is like mathematical operators. So plus, minus, multiplication, divide. Now modulus will give you it'll divide something and give you the remainder. So if you did 13 divided by 2, it will give you just the remainder 1. This will do the opposite. It gives you it divides something and it ignores the remainder. So that 13 divided by 2 would just give you 6. My brain stopped working for a minute there. Okay, so div. Comparison operators are things like greater than, less than, equal to, which is 2 equals, not equal to, which is an exclamation mark and an equals. Now, if you're doing greater than or equal to, just as you are writing it out, just say it to yourself, greater than, equal to, and that way you'll get them the right way round. Less than, equal to. Right? Boolean operators, often used in if statements to check multiple conditions. So, if age is greater than 5 and, now the mistake everybody makes here is they go less than 10, that wouldn't work, you won't get the mark. Age less than 10. So this part, let's colour it in a different colour, and that part are 2 separate conditions. If it's an and, they both have to be true. If it was an or, just one of them has to be true. The other thing you could do is you could use that Boolean variable with a not. So you could say, if not paid. Do you remember that up there? So if not paid, that will basically check if it's false. You actually could, yeah, that will check if it's false. So that's fine. Right, string manipulation. So that's your basics, basically. So that bit was all of this. This bit here. This bit here. I'm just thinking if I have missed anything. I don't think so. So we're on to additional programming techniques. String manipulation. So things you need to know about. How to calculate the length of a string. So you could do this way. This is OCR pseudocode. You could do this. That will calculate the name, the length of the name. Text substring. Yeah, I mean that's fine. That's basically just going to pull out just one character there, look. Another way of doing that would be this. Just draw. Oh, do you know what? I'll just add a square. There we go. That'll do. Right. For substrings, you could do. Let's give this thing a name. So, are we calling it text, are we? So imagine the variable's called text. Probably not a very good name. Let's put greeting. Alright, so then greeting equals hello, right? That's your variable. That's your string. Then if you did this, and then let's say 4, that will pull out the O at the end. So just like arrays, strings have an index starting at 0, and you can use those index positions to pull out individual letters. Concatenation is when you add two strings together to form a new one, to concatenate it, and you just use the plus to do that with two strings variables. That's concatenation. Now this substring, this is the OCR pseudocode, so this is how, if they're giving you an algorithm, they will write it like this, right? The name of the variable and then the word substring. And then they will give you the starting position and how many characters to extract. This is a bit different to how some programming languages work. So that is how the OCR pseudocode works. So just if you get a string question which is asking you about substrings, they realise that their pseudocode works differently to other programming languages, and they will usually give you an example. You've just got to read it really carefully and then just use your logical thinking to answer the question. But it is the starting position and then the number of characters. Okay, so we've got changing case. You just put what you want to change and then dot lower, dot upper, dot capitalize. I mean, in Python you go you actually do things like greeting equals greeting dot upper. You could do that just to make sure that you're changing it to uppercase and saving it into the variable. That's fine. Okay, moving on. This ASCII converter. So do you remember ASCII is like it's a character set. It's basically each character in the alphabet has a numerical code, like capital A has 65, for example. Well, there is this thing called basically it's when you convert a letter into its numerical code, or you convert the numerical code into its letter. Now in OCR pseudocode they're going to use this word ASC. In Python that's ORD, if any of you have used that, and then you'll have the letter that you want to convert there, and then it will give you back the number. Right, arrays. So an array is a list of names. So for example, this array here is called names. These are the data items. This is the index, its position within the array. So it is a a number of data items with one identifier, one name. This is from the OCR pseudocode, so they would write an array like this. They'd put the array, and they'd put the name of it, and then they would put the different positions and what was in those positions. That would pull out an individual item from the array. You can also have a 2D array, which is when you've got multiple rows under one name. And if that's the case, you have a row reference and a column reference. I'm going to show you something on that in the next slide. Over here, you've got some Python for dealing with arrays. You've got a for loop that loops through the length of an array, collecting inputs and saving them in each position. This for loop makes use of the fact that this I is a variable, starts off at 0, and it goes up by 1 with each loop. So that will go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Collecting each input and then saving them in these slots. And then print will just print out one of the items. 2D array. Multiple rows, still got your columns. This time you use a row reference, then a column reference. Usually it's a row reference, then a column reference. Read the question carefully to make sure that that's the case, but it should be. I'm going to show you an exam question with that in a bit, and I've also done another video on 2D arrays, which you can have a look at. File handling. So, with file handling, there's only a few things that you really need to know. How to open a file, read data from it, write data to it, and close it. If you're doing this, if you've got a question to do this, you have to save it into a file object. So that file object could be called anything. I'm going to call it F. Then you open it. Now here you could just put the name of the file. I'm going to just put filename.txt just to demonstrate it. Now I'm going to do it as if it's in Python, right? So in Python you actually put it in speech marks and you put a comma, and then you choose the mode. So read. You've got R for read, A for append, W for write. So then you might do, okay, I'm going to, the file is now referred to as F and it's open and working. So you might write something to it, write line, data. Once you've finished your task, you close the file. Get a mark for that, for just writing the name of the file or the file object, f.close. Get a mark for that. Now this could be read line. That would be fine. That just reads in a line of data. Yeah. With read line, I think you put the name, the number of the line there. Yeah. This is from the OCR pseudo guide guide book that there is. It's online, you can Google it. I think it's also in our classwork section of our team. So that just uses read line, open bracket, close bracket. You don't need to put anything in it. This here will read in each line until it gets to the end of the file. I've never seen a question on it, but it is in the OCR pseudocode guide, so you could have a read through that if you wanted. I'm going to keep moving though, keep going. So functions and procedures are subprograms. Functions return a value, procedures don't. Okay. If you have to write a function, you could use def instead of the word function if you wanted to. That's the name of the function, that's the data that's being passed in, and then because it's a function it returns a value, so it's going to return that back into the program. So when that's being called from the program, it will most likely be linked to a variable, and then it will call the subprogram and it will pass in the data. So the output of that is going to be 7 times by 3. So 21. 21 going into the y variable. A procedure just does some actions, that's all. I've talked about casting, changing data types. SQL is when you are pulling out data from a database and you just write it like this. Look, This is how you write SQL. You put the keywords. Whoa. Hold on a minute. There we go. There we go. Right. Okay, so select, then you put what columns you want. Let's imagine we want the names column. Then, on the next line, from, you put what table you're going to pick it from. That will be in the question. It'll tell you what columns it wants. It'll tell you what the name of the table is. Now you do the criteria. So where, let's say, age is greater than 18. And let's say order by ascending. Finish with a semicolon. That's it. Done it. So it just would pull out all of the names from the table called table where the age is over 18, and it will order them ascendingly. So you've also got descending, DESC, and that is it. You could use the star wildcard here. That would just give you all columns. And if you wanted, let's say that you wanted it to be everything where the name starts with an A, you could use this percentage. I haven't seen this asked, but you never know. Okay, so where name equal to percentage, oh no, starts with an A, percentage. There we go. That's it. That's the whole of SQL. Now, all the rest of these slides are example questions, but this is a really long video, so I'm going to stop there and I'll do another one for these example questions. Alright.